I'd like to call this meeting to order. It's Wednesday, June 19th, and this is a regular meeting of the Pear Beach Building Committee. The first order of business is the approval of the minutes from the prior meeting, the June 5th meeting. I think those minutes have been circulated. Do we have any comments or questions on the minutes? I just had one small typo. It says Mr. Scrow then asked. Just asked in past tense. Okay, so then if I can just ask for a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
So moved.
Do we have a second? Thank you, Martha. Thank you, Mark. So Mark and Martha. Thank you. Okay, so moving on to the next item on our agenda. Sorry.
We have to prove it.
Oh, second time in a row I've forgotten that. All those in favor? Great, thank you. Thank you, Martha. Trying to build some shortcuts into the meetings here, you know? So the next item on our agenda is we've got Neil and team with us. Thanks again, Brian and Rob, for joining us. I thought before we turned it over to Neil, and maybe just a reminder, you know, we've said this before, but you know, we're in the kind of midst of a process here. You know, and I guess I would refer to it as an iterative process. And really the goal is to have a dialogue with Neil, share our thoughts with Neil and team, and see that, and kind of observe how Neil replays those back to us in the form of either some schematics or some sketches or some concepts, and you know, also create a good, healthy, open dialogue so that at the end of the day we can get to a solution that we feel is a workable solution. So I guess my only point here is, you know, we're not done, and nothing's cast in stone. We've probably got a couple more iterations, and maybe more than a couple more iterations to go through. And so this is just simply a next step. At our last meeting, Neil played back to us information, you know, a set of schematics based upon the information that Pam had provided as our director of Parks and Recs. So I would also just remind everybody that the information that Pam shared is Pam's request. It's not a mandate from the commission. It's a request from, you know, the director of Parks and Recs. I mean, Pam has a vision. She's articulated that vision very clearly, I think, and in the process of doing that, has shared information with Neil, and to that extent, you know, Neil came back to us at our last meeting and provided, you know, some initial thoughts as to how, what that might look like in terms of a solution. So I left the last meeting thinking to myself, I had a couple of questions. The first question was, how did I get myself into this? The next question, though, all kidding aside, was, you know, what is the right answer? How do we get to a right answer? You know, but more importantly, what is the process to get the committee to a point where we can ideally agree to some extent on kind of a solution so that, you know, we're not here contemplating our navels for the rest of our lives, and Neil can move along and we're not spinning Neil's wheels. And of course we can bring the community along with us to the extent that that's possible. And so to that extent, I had a conversation, so we had met on Monday. I then had a follow-up conversation with Neil the following day. And what I shared with Neil was, once again, you know, the question, okay, so, and we talked a little bit about this in the meeting as well, but, you know, I extended the conversation on the call with Neil. My question to Neil was, okay, so how do we get to an answer? From your perspective, you've seen this type of thing unfolding from time to time. How do we get to an answer that could be a reasonable answer? And in the course of the conversation, I offered up a solution. Prior to that, Randy and I had a chat as well. So prior to my call to Neil, Randy and I had a chat, and I think we were kind of the same mind, once again, you know, wondering what that answer might be, but more importantly, how do we get to the answer? So what I had shared with Neil was a thought that Randy and I kind of circled around, which is, okay, Neil presented us with one set of concepts last week based upon one set of numbers, which we're all aware of. And I thought maybe an approach here could be to ask Neil, first of all, you know, and once again, what we're talking about here, and I think we're going to have difficulty making further progress until we kind of figure out an answer to this question, is the definition or the use of what we've labeled as flexible community space. So the answer that I'm kind of referring to is what are we going to be happy with, or what do we see as the solution to the definition of flexible community space in the context of what we're talking about at Pear So what I had asked, once again coming out of the conversation with Randy and I, what I posed to Neil is the following. First off, asked Neil, share with us what you think would be kind of the bare minimum size of a space, below which it's probably not worth doing anything. So that was the first. Didn't ask for a specific number, but I asked, okay, we know what 2,000 square feet looks like. Although, by the way, we only understand that in the abstract. So the other bit, and I'll come back to it, that I'd asked Neil for, is to help us kind of visualize a bit better. So, if you kind of use the metaphor of a digital camera, add a few more pixels in here. So we understand what 2,000 square foot looks like in terms of square, but help us understand how many people that can accommodate, what kind of seating arrangements that potentially can accommodate. And so going back to my kind of the framework that I posed to Neil, the first question was, give us a sense of kind of the minimal space from an architectural perspective in light of what we're attempting to do at this particular piece of ground, in this setting, below which it doesn't make sense to even bother with it. So that's the first point. And then help us kind of with a few incremental steps understand if we had a space that was a bit larger than that, what that might look like, a bit larger than that, what that might look like. And we already understand what 2,000 square feet looks like. And Neil fill in the blanks in terms of helping us understand how many people that can accommodate and what the seating arrangements might look like. As I mentioned, I spoke with Randy on Thursday morning, spoke with Neil Thursday afternoon. Randy and I then got on a call with Neil Friday morning. We went through it again. And I believe what Neil and team will share with us is in the context of that kind of request. Because once again, I left feeling like, gee, this is just a little too abstract. Regardless of what my feelings are, I'll share my feelings in a moment, but I could understand how it might be difficult for those of us around the table here to figure out what this really translates to. So that's the first thing. And I believe, we've chatted today as well, and I think what we'll see today will be kind of a series of kind of increments here to help us better kind of circle around something, or at least understand, aside from what we saw last week, what the range of options could look like. That's the first thing. I also want to just go back to the set of objectives that came out of the commission. And just as a reminder to everybody, what got worked, as we were putting the RFP together, what got worked into that initial set of objectives was the objective to have 2 meeting spaces that could be used for a range of activities. We can all go back and look at see what was in that initial set of objectives that came out of the commission. Just once again as a reminder, once we understood that what that represented, and that might have been, we may have taken some liberties in adding things into what the commission had settled on. I brought that back to the commission. We had a conversation, and ultimately what that got translated into, or changed to, was the consideration of flexible community space, or space that could be used by the community. I'm now going to share with you my understanding of what that means. And what I think that means in the context of Pear Tree Beach is some level of an enclosed space that could be available to folks that would be open certainly during the summer season when folks are at the beach and we've got lifeguards, that folks can come into, get out of the sun, potentially maybe read a book, have a sandwich, get together with a few friends, have a cup of coffee, a small, well, I would just say a space that's appropriate for a piece of property of that size. I don't believe that the commission, and this runs a bit counter to Pam's vision, but once again, I would remind everybody it's a vision. It's not something that the commission had mandated. So my sense is, and I guess now I'm kind of exposing what I'm in favor of, my sense is that what would be more appropriate in that space would be something in the way that I just described, something a bit more intimate and useful for folks, once again, to be able to you know, if it's sprinkling, if folks are at the beach and all of a sudden you get a little rain shower passing, there's a place for folks to go. I realize we have the gazebo, but once again, you know, part of this is the objective of kind of adding and making things a bit better for folks. So, I guess my point here is I don't want anybody to feel around this table, because maybe not everyone, I know not everyone was at those original meetings, but I don't want anybody around this table to feel as though there's a mandate that we have to defend as a building committee from the commission to build space that could be used for, that could be rentable, that could be used for events. I feel as though, you know, to the extent now we've gotten ourselves in a little bit of a jam having to defend something that wasn't there to begin with. So before we turn it over to Neil, I'm happy to open it up for a bit of conversation. I chatted a bit with Lori, I think, and Lori, feel free to kind of, you know, share your thoughts here. I think what Lori's hope is here is that the committee can kind of sort out what would be the appropriate size of a space without bringing that back to the commission. And, you know, because we're the ones that are in a dialogue with the architect and Neil's team. And, you know, we're in a position where we can kind of tease that out a bit more than the commission can at this point. I think it's the commission's wish to create a space that's usable at the beach. And once again, that could be usable for a number of events, and I'm not kind of ruling out the possibility that it could be used for certain types of other events. But I think kind of the core of it is to create a space for the community to have access to, and just improve the experiences I kind of waxed poetically about when we were last together. So Lori, I don't know, maybe I'll just pass it over to you, and feel free to tell me that I completely got it wrong.
No, I think that's correct. I mean, there was a robust discussion when the wording of the RFP was changed. Jamie was in attendance, and we settled on the words, you know, flexible community space, effectively to be flexible. So that it could be, as you said, it can be just a room that is open to the public to use during the day because people don't want to sit in the sun, they want to get out of the sun, they want to sit with a few friends. It might be rented out for groups to host a private event. That's what we need to sort through in the context of what's suitable for the size of the beach, the property, and the limitations we have by the various regulations that we have to abide by. So it's really sorting through that to come to a solution that provides a nice amenity for the community at large.
Great. And maybe the only other thing I'd add in here, not to try to take away too much of kind of, you know, Neil's explanation here, is, you know, Neil walked Randy and I through. And by the way, I just want to say how appreciative I am of the amount of time that Neil and team have been spending with us. So we've been on the phone. They've, you know, just to remind everybody, when we went through the RFP, and maybe Neil, you should close your ears so you don't hear too many good things. But when we went through the RFP, we were kind of deliberating, gee, how many schematic designs should we ask for here? And I think, you know, Neil has, even at the outset, but he's demonstrated his ability, his willingness to just do what needs to be done here to help us get to within reason, to get to an answer. So Neil walked Randy and I through kind of a set of projects that he had previously worked on, which we'll talk about here. And I thought it was really enlightening, and just reinforced, when we got to the end of that conversation, and as we went through it, it just reinforced my sense of, you know, as I just kind of shared with you guys. So, you know, maybe with that, Neil, I'll turn it over to you guys, and, you know, if you have any questions for us. Before I do that, let me just open it up to the committee and once again ask if anybody has any questions or would like any clarification on what's happened between then and now.
You know, I want to say this respectfully, but I have a real problem with the way this process is going on. Pam met with the architect and gave him certain direction. It wasn't any direction that the committee gave her to give to him. She didn't really communicate back to us what direction she gave. You went ahead and talked directly to the architect, not based on any discussion the committee would have. And, you know, I'm feeling like, what role is this committee playing at this point? And I also want to say, with respect to this flexible space, and I watched the November meeting where Park and Rec voted to remove the 2 multi-purpose rooms from the building charge and to, quote, consider flexible space for community use. And at this meeting, I noted that there was discussion around the fact that Park and Rec didn't want to tie the hands of the building committee, and that flexible space was an option for the building committee to consider, but not a mandate. And somehow, and you know, we conveyed this to the people that were responding to our RFQ, and yet every one of the schematics presented to us thus far has contained program space, including one which contained 2 program rooms which were removed, you know, from the original charge. And also during that RFQ process, the building committee sent out clarification of the scope of work to bidders, saying either rehabilitate the existing structure or replace the existing structure and build anew. But we haven't seen one schematic for just a straight rehabilitation of the existing structure, and I think we need this. I think this process, we're going with the assumption that the building committee is absolutely got to decide that we're going to add flexible space, I guess, at an elevated level. And, you know, I just think some of us are getting short shrift and giving input to you.
Mm-hmm. May I? Yeah. So first off, just to clarify one point here, and this is based upon my understanding of the charge of the individuals on the committee. So Randy and I, as co-chairs, I think my understanding is in our full purview to work offline between meetings to progress the process.
I don't object to that. I mean, in fact,
let me just finish.
But let me just say
Okay.
that I think it's with input from the committee.
Well, I think I just demonstrated, I think by my preamble here, I think I've demonstrated that the conversation I just shared with you that I've had with Neil is completely reflective of the input from the committee, I think. I mean, the input that I got last week was there was some concern about the size. And by the way, it wasn't as though Pam had, to my knowledge, Pam has not met with Neil.
Well, I mean, she
we
gave
asked-
him the information for the
Well, I think
basis
based,
of which is
yeah,
first
we've
schematics.
clarified that going forward now, but I think maybe where there may have been a slight disconnect is the committee essentially charged Pam to provide her requirements to Neil. So I think Pam did what we asked her to do, but to your point, I agree with you.
I mean,
there would have been a better way to.
Forward, it's more collaborative.
No question about it, and I'm just going on record here as agreeing with you that there would have been a better way to do that, and the better way to do that is if we had brought that number back and had this discussion around it. But okay, so I think if anybody's really been injured by that, it's really Neil and team who've done some work that I'm not sure how valuable that work will be going forward. So that's one thing. The other thing is, I just shared with the entire group here that I think it's a process. So I'm not driving towards this. I mean, I'm speaking for myself here, but as a co-chair, I'm not driving towards a specific solution. I'm trying to understand how we work through a process as expeditiously as we can to get to an answer. I don't know what the answer is, and you're absolutely right. I mean, I realize that we, and you reminded us that one of the options we've asked for is to can rebuild the existing or renovate the existing. We can have that conversation. I mean, I think we understand what the implications are. At the end of the day, we're going to vote, and we have to figure out what we're voting on and when we're voting. But so look, I appreciate your input.
I'm trying to be. I just would like to see a more.
Well, I'm uncomfortable that you're feeling as though there are committee members who've been giving short shrift. Look, we're all here, we're all volunteering, we're all spending a lot of time, whether online or offline, and the last thing in the world anybody wants is for anybody to feel as though like they're not being heard. So to that extent, we'll work on that going forward. But I do want to just clarify. I think we can get a reading on this, but it's certainly been my understanding from the formation of the building committee that, in fact, I think it's encouraged for the co-chairs to kind of work offline so that we can make progress between meetings and come back. Now, if we're doing that with our own agenda and we're coming back to the table with something that's completely askew to what the rest of the, then I think we have a problem. You'll tell us if you feel as though that's what's happening. I don't think so. I mean, I think we're being kind of I think what we're attempting to do is reflective of what we're hearing from the committee, but I'll leave it to the committee to kind of share with us. You can give us the report card on how we're doing.
I have a question. When you were going through your discussion here, you came up with 2,000 square feet.
I didn't come up with 2,000 square
Well,
feet.
I wanna know, you said we know what 2,000 square feet is.
Well, that's what Pam shared with,
Okay, so where did we get the 2,000 square feet?
well, that was discussed in the meeting,
In these drawings?
that was discussed
Okay.
in the meeting last
I
week.
wanna make sure I'm on
No,
the
let me
right
just,
page.
let me just answer the question. That was discussed in the meeting, oh, sorry, Randy, go ahead.
I mean, the sort of thing we tossed around was, suppose it was a space that was about twice the size of the paddle hut space. And that's
Right.
about 2,000 square feet. So that's kind of where they started.
Okay, so that's where it came from.
Yeah, and one of the
I
options-
just wanted to make
The
sure
other
I was
thing I
on the
just-
same page in the same book.
Yeah,
The other thing I want to say, what you mentioned, Martha, is, you know, we talked around this whole rehabilitation thing of the existing building. And at one point, we came up with the amount of the dollars we're constrained to spend
Right.
to rehabilitate.
Mhm.
And I think I thought we all basically agreed it was a waste of time to go that, to even talk about that.
Well, I don't think we ever took a vote on that.
We didn't take a vote. There was a sense of the meeting that you can't do much for $30,000 in that bathroom place,
Well, I mean,
except
there's
throw
a,
some paint on it.
well,
And Neil's solution around that, to actually build a structure over it, that's not attached to it, gives us a lot more freedom of what we can do. And yeah, it's gotta be 15 feet or whatever it is. Obviously, the 2,000 feet was not gonna work for any
well,
of
it was
us.
over 4,000 feet, each of the schematics that were
But,
presented.
yeah, but you got 2,000 feet that's sticking up in the air, and you have some deck space, okay? So, and, you know, Neil's come back and he's got, you know, Mike and I and Neil, we looked at a couple of different projects that he's done to see, well, how many tables and how many people can you get in to 500 square feet or to 900 square feet?
Well, going back to the renovation, I mean, I think it's a worthwhile exercise, and already he's drawn schematics for a redo of the bathroom, which he felt he could do within, you know, the 50% FEMA regulation. I mean, we have to address some issues about, do we need a concession stand? Don't we need, what kind of food service do we wanna have at the beach? We've gotta have some discussion about that.
And we've been discussing that back and forth.
Yeah, now you could reconfigure the interior, plus it couldn't touch the building, but I understand you could build decking around the building, and, you know, if you rehabbed the exterior a little bit, and granted, you don't have a whole lot of money to play with, but then you built a series of decking or pergolas or shade and added more tables and dining space, it might look like a totally new facility. I think it's a worthwhile exercise. I don't think it should be dismissed as offhand.
yeah. I don't disagree. So, you know, perhaps, if I can make a suggestion, why don't we go through, I'll, you know, turn it over to Neil, go through this, and before I do that, just once again to clarify, since you asked me the question, if you go back to that original schematic from last week, there are two 1,047 or something like that, or two 1,027 square foot kind of dividable spaces that become one room. That's where I got my 2,000 number from.
The upstairs.
Yeah, in the upstairs.
Okay. I too would like to see the rehab of the downstairs buildings. I was down there numerous times this week amongst the raindrops and measured out all kinds of concepts and tried to figure out how far out you were going out from some of the drawings that we had from last week or 2 weeks ago. And because we don't have any footage on here, so it was just eyeballing here and there and trying to, came home and drew up some plans of my own and to see how it would balance the building with a deck on one side and a building on the other side of it, and tried to visualize all of this. And I don't know, to me it's gonna be a little top heavy in some concepts with a deck on top and then a building on one side of it with, you know, rooms on one side of it. I would like to see the bathrooms downstairs renovated. I'd like to know, you have the concept here. I think that that can be accomplished. I agree with Martha in part that we need to see what the kitchen or the concession stand could look at, like redone with maybe, someone mentioned to me, maybe not having all of the equipment that he has in there now, less types of it, maybe not a fryer later, maybe not doing maybe bringing in sandwiches and salads, maybe changing the concepts of the menu would change what the equipment is needed inside of this building so that the concession stand can stay downstairs. I think that's important, and that's important to me, to see some kind of concession stand downstairs. All these decks and wrapping around and everything else to get upstairs to get a hot dog or a salad or whatever is a hike, in my opinion. And this is my own opinion. And so I would like to see some kind, you have the bathrooms pretty much drawn on here. I'd like to see the other side of the building, to see if we can have the police room there, make the lifeguards room with a window as they wanted, see if we could make a kayak rack or the board rack on the outside of the building, and go on that and see what we can come up with there. That's where I am. I'd like to see that done.
Okay, thank you. Mark, any observations or thoughts?
I've been trying to think kind of back to basics as to how much we should do in a property that floods, in a property that the road to it floods. I know it doesn't flood every week, or probably even every month, but several times a year.
Every month.
Every month.
Pretty much every month?
At least.
So the question is what fits on this particular property. Now, there's some things we didn't know when we started, right? It would have been a grand idea to raise the whole parking lot 2 feet. They won't let us. And when you think about it, if the road floods, what's the point? I'm still concerned that we haven't done enough environmental work. I know the boat club had a huge project to do their deck because it's in the same flood zone that this property is in. So, while I would love to have some more deck space there, it's very popular at the boat club. It's a great idea. I don't know if it can be permitted in a way that would be affordable. So I kind of got these. I'm trying to go back to the fundamentals, and then we can kind of build up from there. I don't want to spend a lot of time thinking about a building with a lot of ramps and things if it's not really the right thing to do in that property.
Appreciate that. Tom, any thoughts at this stage?
Nothing that hasn't already been said.
I'm anxious to see what we have to see tonight.
Okay, so maybe with that, and then, I would suggest we'll let these guys do their thing, and then we come back around and, think about when we, how and when we go about the conversation around the renovate, and have that conversation with you, Neil, and explore some of the things that you've also kind of suggested, Cheryl. So Neil, how about if I turn it over to you and
Well, after having heard all of that, I'd just like to make a couple of comments before I get into our presentation. And first of all, I've been doing this a long time, and most of the time when we begin a project in the office, we've been given a fairly clearly defined building program. So we have elements, we know what the components are, what sizes they are, and we can move forward and zero in on schematic design work concepts. And in this case, through no fault of anyone, there are different opinions of what the building program should be. So when we made our first presentation, we presented a couple, what we call bubble diagrams, schematic concepts. And we also came up with a list of questions. And probably the biggest unknown was, what was the flexible community space? And how big? What was it going to be used for? And so after that first meeting, I think Mike and Randy asked Pam to forward information to me about what she envisioned that space doing. And so last time when we made a presentation, we started out with a scheme that addressed Pam's hopes. And then we also gave you two schemes that were smaller to try to say, well, maybe, the idea of doing everything was just too much. We're starting to realize that. So, but again, it's a process. We presented that information. We heard back from the committee. We heard back from the neighbors. We've tried to synthesize all that. And I will say that Mike, Randy, and Pam have been great about hearing that, listening to what you all had to say, talking to me about it, and we've tried to put our heads together to figure out, well, okay, where do we go next? So, in a discussion I had with Mike and Randy, I started to mention other projects that we've been involved with in town. We've done work at, as you know, Reed Beach. We've done work at the Historical Society. We've done work at the DCA. We've done work at other areas, other places outside of town that have similar kinds of flexible space. And so Randy and Mike asked me if I would take those plans and drop some furniture on them so they could get a sense for the scale of, well, just how much, how many chairs or tables can fit in these rooms, how can they be used? And we quickly determined that, maybe some of the spaces were too large for this particular site. So this slide that we have up there now, on the left-hand plan is the paddle hut at Reed Beach. And the room that you see that's at the top of the plan there encloses approximately 950 square feet. Now, you may remember that's the room we had the meeting in a couple of weeks ago. Yes.
Maybe you didn't make it helpful. Thanks. Thank you.
We then looked at the room that's in the DCAs. You come in the front door of the old house, it's straight ahead with the old living room. That room is somewhere around 750 square feet. That's not shown on this slide. And then we looked at the library in the Darien Historical Society, which is, as you come in the front door, it's the room immediately to your left. And that's the middle plan that you see there. That encompasses about 400 square feet, a little over 400 square feet. And as we looked at that, Mike and Randy felt that that was maybe the size of space that would function well at Pear Tree. It could be a place where people who are on the beach can go inside to get out of the sun. It could have lounge furniture, it could have a couple tables so people can dine. It could also be used for meetings if so desired. But 400 square feet is about, it's less than half of the space that is at Reed Beach in the paddle hut. And it's approximately 1/5 of what we showed you in our first scheme last week. So it's significantly less square footage. And the question that Mike and Randy had, and then Pam as well, was, is this enough? We don't want to build something that's so small that it doesn't function. And I think we all came to the conclusion that this is actually about the right square footage for the intended use. And so that third plan that's to the right on the screen is the plan that we are presenting this evening. And just to, again, we haven't had a lot of time to work on it, but we wanted to see, well, what would it look like if we shrunk this flexible space down to approximately 400 square feet. So, Rob, you want to go to the next scheme? So that we wanted to take another look at the beach. And in this case, we thought it might be helpful to build a small study model, a massing model we would call it, that would enable us to take a look at the scale of this thing in 3 dimensions in a very crude form. Just, you know, because there were some, I think a lot of people last time were having a problem looking at floor plans, which are horizontal in nature, and not really understanding what the massing might be. So in this case, in this model, what you see, the dark blue is the water at low tide, mean low tide. The edge of this top section where the lighter blue meets the white is the mean high tide. So then the lighter blue section in between is the tidally influenced area. And what you see here is the existing pavilion, where this front part is, for those of you familiar with it, that's the bathroom block, and this is the block that holds all the other facilities. There's a flat roof area between it, and then there's the gazebo.
Hey Neil, can I just stop you 1 second? Apologies.
Yeah.
What we'll do is we'll allow Neil to go through his explanation and give you guys a moment to come up and have a look at it more closely, just so you can kind of put things in perspective for his following comments.
So that's what's there now. You can see the gazebo's on a little knoll, and it has some trees around it, and then there are the 2 jetties that project out into the water. One thing that we discovered that we didn't know was that this jetty, the southernmost jetty, is actually underwater at high tide. So we learned that if we're going to put some sort of a walkway out there, we have to elevate it. So that's one thing we discovered. So now going back to the plan, our proposal tonight, which again is just another step in the process. It's not meant to be cast in stone. It's a point of discussion to try to determine what this project is and what it looks like. So in this case, we have that lower area you see there is the bathroom wing. We're proposing some remodeling to that, and essentially you'll have 3 toilets and 3 sinks on the women's side, 2 urinals and a toilet and 3 sinks on the men's side. And then as you first come in, there are 2 little cabanas, if you will, or changing cubicles. So people can come and change without going back into the bathroom proper. And then the other component no longer has the concession stand that would go up to an elevated level, but would house the lifeguard office, the first aid space, the police space, and then some storage, some leftover storage. And in this case, we've left the gazebo. We have left the path that goes up to the gazebo. And we are, well, I'll get to some other components on the next slide. So if we go to the second slide, this is now the upper level. So in this scheme, you can see that we've essentially, built a small concession that's closest to the parking lot. There are stairs that come up on either side of it to an elevated dining deck, and this hovers over the existing building. And then there's an open deck between the concession and this flexible community space. The flexible community space is about 400 square feet. There's one wheelchair accessible bathroom, and there's a closet for storage and mechanical equipment. And it's designed in such a way that there's a flat roof over the entire structure to keep it lower in scale. And that also provides shade in the area between the two components, between the concession stand and the flexible space. So that gives potential users a place to get out of the sun, to get out of the rain, but it's a nice open area. And we were thinking that the community space could even have the kind of roll-up doors or fold-up doors so that the east and west walls could, in essence, be open. So it's almost like another gazebo in nice weather. In this scheme, we have a ramp structure shown where one enters the ramp sort of on the plaza to the left of the left stair there. Do you have a cursor there, Rob? I don't have a pointer. Yeah, there we go. So you enter right there, go up to a landing, turn left, go up to a second landing that's at the level of the gazebo. So that allows someone in a wheelchair to get from the parking lot, from the space right in front of that little plaza there, up to the gazebo. Just up, over, and up. And then from there, one either can go left, go out the end of the platform there, down a couple steps, and out to a pathway that would be on top of the jetty that would allow you to walk out to the end of the pier and take a look out into the ocean, the sound. Or at the gazebo, one could turn right and head up the ramp to the elevated dining deck. So it's a fairly compact way to get a ramp up and connect everything, essentially. One could also go underneath the, where you see the existing curved stone wall. One can walk back through underneath, past the lifeguard and the first aid station, and out to, we could have another walkway on top of the other stone jetty. So one possibility would be to put some sort of walkway on both of the stone jetties and have the ability to go out to both. And so that's really the concept. And then we have another way to get up that would involve a slightly more exciting ramp structure. It's actually semicircular. And I think maybe go to the second floor plan there, Rob. Yeah, you can see it. So what happens is one starts at the end of that curved stone area, goes up to an actual landing that's a platform that looks out between the two existing stone jetties to an area of the beach that one rarely occupies. You've got the beach to the west, you've got the beach to the south, but that's an area between the two stone jetties that really is, there's very little sand there, and I don't think people occupy that. So that would be a nice viewing platform. It could be a place for a couple of tables for someone to have lunch. But that curved walkway comes around to a platform that's in front of the gazebo, and then from there you can again go either to the stone jetty to the south, or go back up on the inside of that semicircular ramp and land at the upper platform. So those are two different ways to handle the ramping structure. The first one is a little bit more direct. The second one's a little bit more exciting and potentially more of a different kind of experience. And we have a model that will show you both. Rob's diligently working on getting the second one up. But now if you go to the next slide, which is our last slide, I think you'll see that what we're showing here is the two darker gray rectangles represent the first floor of what's there now. That's the existing pavilion. The lighter gray areas, there's one between the two components and one to the left of the upper component. Those are flat roofed covered areas. So that really, all of that is the footprint of what's there now. And what we show in the dashed lines are the two components that are above. So you see that they're not even as big as the existing pavilion when taken together. And the deck that wraps around everything, which would provide a slightly larger footprint to what's there. And as you can see in the model, again, it's just a fairly rudimentary, massive model, but what it does show is the scale of it. So if you take the existing structure and you put it next to what we're proposing, you can see that, yes, it is a little bit bigger, but it's not much bigger in terms of the footprint. And by placing a flat roof on top of the second story, it doesn't really get much taller than the ridge of the existing building. So that, that's the direction we went in a very short period of time to try to continue to get our hands around this project and what the program is and scale-wise what it might look like. So,
Anybody want to take a closer look?
I have a question. Do you have any idea the height of from the peak of the old building, or the building that's there now? Okay, from that peak to the height of the new building?
so
What's the difference between that peak and then that flat roof? How many feet? So how much higher is the new building with the flat roof?
It's like 4 feet.
I would say 4 feet.
About 4 feet
From the
higher.
ridge,
Yeah.
not from the eaves, but from the ridge.
Sure.
Yeah.
From the peak of the roof.
Right.
Okay. So if you were to put a peaked roof up there, what would be the height of a peaked roof?
Well, you'd probably go up another, well, depending on the pitch and how you do it.
You're asking for what reason? Just so I understand where you're going.
Well,
You prefer a peaked roof? Or?
I would prefer a peaked roof because we've had a lot of problems with flat roofs over the years
Okay.
in town. So I would prefer anything we do would be a peaked roof. I don't want,
From a maintenance perspective.
yeah,
Snow.
Mhm.
yeah.
Well, one thing we could do, because the concession stand is so narrow, we could actually do a ridge that goes perpendicular to the length, parallel with the length of it, so that wouldn't get very high.
Mhm.
And we could do the same with the other component, and then have a shallow roof connection between them, so.
Would an angled flat roof, I mean, if it's perfectly flat, could you tilt it to
Yeah.
some effect? So-
Yeah.
Because I really
Of
like
course.
that design concept, because it's basically the
They
same.
look flat, but they aren't flat.
If you could just angle it so the sun would melt it and it would go off, that preserves the height difference, because you're saying a flat roof would be, a peaked roof would be certainly more than 4 feet taller
Mhm.
at peak. So it's just an idea.
There are many ways to detail. I mean, one thing we kicked around too was putting a green roof up there. I mean, sort of a living roof where you've got plants, grasses up there, so
You could also put solar panels on it too.
Okay.
lots
Yeah.
of possibilities.
Yeah,
yes.
because this building's supposed to be self-sustainable, so I was thinking of that also.
All good ideas.
Speaking for myself, that's a huge improvement from what we saw.
The scale is much different.
Yes. When can you start?
So the whole building, as it sits now, with a flat roof, is how, from the ground up, would be how high? Do you have any idea?
Let's see, 9, 17, 18, maybe 18 feet, 18, 19 feet, somewhere in that area,
Okay, under 20.
yes.
So the elevation of the first floor is what?
The elevation of the existing parking lot, or the area where the
Existing building?
existing building is about elevation 8. 7.9, something, so
Got it.
we call it 8. The new elevated structure to conform to FEMA has to be at 17. So 9 feet above that. And then, depending on the height, whether it's an 8-foot high or a 9-foot high ceiling and the two new components, you're 9, let's call it a 9-foot ceiling and then 1 foot of roof on top of that. You're approximately 19 feet above grade.
Because I saw one corner on the survey of the building is about, of the existing building is about 5.5 feet. So, I mean, I guess.
Not the floor. It might be that the grade is.
Corner, okay, that's,
Yeah.
okay.
That's probably your mark, the
I
grade
think on
falls
the other
away.
side, yeah.
The grade falls away in that one corner, yes.
But if we work with the existing building, that is what it is.
Yeah, no, I just want to remember.
I'm sorry, Adele?
I think it looks great, actually, I'm just amazed it's only 4 feet difference in the top of it.
Yeah, can we get, I mean, I guess you're not able to show how the ramping, or am I not seeing it good enough?
Well, feel free to, I mean,
Yeah.
maybe, why don't we take, and then maybe we'll just invite, our friends to join us here too. I've also reminded maybe while we're all kind of moving around here, a few of us who have chatted that, the flexible community space isn't only the enclosed space. So what Neil has now presented us with is a combination of enclosed space and covered space. And that's really, quite, yeah.
Both of those doors are open.
And deck, of course, yeah.
Oh, I couldn't see that from.
All right, so the way, you can see how it works. You get on the ramp here, you come up to a little viewing platform that's between the two pieces. Looking out at this, which is really, this is very much the quintessential New England coast with the rocks. And then from there, go up to this landing where you can enter the gazebo or come down the pier. Or turn around and go up the inside curve of the ramp to the upper level.
Now, what would be a underpinning structure underneath the?
Oh, they
have to be a pier.
some sort of post.
That's a long,
Not pertinent.
had enough when it's fine.
Yeah, that, this one was the other one.
And it can be a lot.
To give you a lot of credit.
This one,
If it starts to rain in,
or inside ramp gets you up to the,
Worst case
well, actually, so this is a more direct, more compact. I mean, so it's not quite as interesting. This one gives you more of an experience.
What's the deepness?
You name it.
Like a ramp, like on an angle here. I'm taking this as the driveway.
Yes.
So if you started here and went up that way, how steep would that be? It's too steep.
Code requires
That's what I was doing.
1 inch per foot.
1 inch per foot.
So that's why it's got to be.
So long.
Or not? Is that not?
I don't think that's the one. We're doing this because we heard from the committee, it would be nice to connect. So we tried to come up with ways.
I think it's great. I like the kind of
Is
thing.
this a proposal to the water?
No.
Like railing is in
That's the
the
one
end.
for
Nice big deck. Between, it doesn't extend all the way between the two, but in other words,
And that way they, and that way you get up to the rail.
I love the idea. It's really,
This is a short, this is sort of a short steps. These are steps. Okay, so where do you get the, so then where do you start with the rig?
That's one level of
But if we were to keep the concession stand downstairs, someone could still get to the concession stand on grade and then not have to go. Start there and then go here and then back again to there and then, oh, right, and then back over in here.
goes back up.
Right.
But is this enough decking where there could be tables and things right here?
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Well, there's all the area.
Down in the middle.
and if you, and the doors that you're considering, I guess you could open, you could get kind of a good cross flow going so that your breeze is flowing through there.
This side and this side. Wide open. I mean, you could have all three sides open. You could have all three sides
That is just such a huge ramp. That's the only thing I'm concerned about, because I know somebody Yes. Same length, you go this way and that way, you go this way or that way.
It's a common device, you
It's
know,
unfortunate that it has
not
to
breaking new
be
ground with you.
so much ADA constraints.
It is, and you know, those of us who spent the last few years pushing elderly parents around.
Yeah. By the way, I've had the chance to speak to Patricia at the beach now. Yeah, we're coming
Because I
there.
picture what you're saying.
In the van, she's driven there. So it comes very regularly.
Yes, there was a girl.
There and one is there.
Yeah, anyway, so,
But it would be higher, the ridge would be higher.
We would give it a,
And we could certainly, we were trying to keep everything down.
model helps, thank you.
You want to be up there?
yeah, so, maybe just thinking about next steps here, and I know we've got to be mindful that we've got Lori and
At a minimum, Pam, I have to wait.
yeah, yeah,
It'll all be set up though.
I know, but
Yeah, just,
I'm the commission chair, I have to be there when the meeting starts.
yeah. So, Neil, what's your well, any comments? I think a number of you shared comments. Anything else you'd like to share at the moment, or? Certainly, from my perspective, a dramatic difference from what, once again, we're talking about a range of options, a spectrum of options, and it's a spectrum. This is on one dramatic end in comparison to what we saw last week. And it's been credit to you guys for being able to make something happen so quickly. Anything else? Because I think Tom?
Just
Sorry, Mark?
just a comment, I remember when we did the RFQ and we had several people, several firms responding, they said they didn't feel we could build a walk on top of the jetties, because with heavy wave action, those rocks move. So I just, is that a fact or not? I'm not the engineer, but
Yeah.
if it is a fact, then maybe, we gotta deal with that.
I would think that's where we have to get Weston and Sampson involved, and they have basically subcontractors or whatever that have the coastal expertise. So
Yeah.
that's a big piece
So
of
just
all
keep
of
that,
this.
we don't wanna forget that.
Yes,
Before we
yeah, absolutely.
continue.
The more important that jetty becomes, the more important it is to know.
Whoever's gonna talk to Weston and Sampson, if we could get some sites that we could go look at, kind of thing, that would be interesting.
Well, the Tokenique Club is that same thing.
Step over the jetty.
Yeah, the jetty
I've never
goes,
been down to the water.
the jetty goes out south off the beach, and then there's a walkway that they put on top of it, and they take it off season. It's not there off season.
Now, is this jetty gonna be, would fishing be allowed off this jetty?
I think we've heard enough that, it seems like it's probably not a great idea.
I think
that's a-
myself, I think it's a
Yeah,
safety
the
issue.
idea, yeah, I don't see.
But would you provide a place for fishing, because there are people that do fish?
Yeah, I don't know, I almost feel like that's not.
I'm sorry?
The back jetty, I call it the back jetty, instead, where the
western
blue
jetty.
jet, the western jetty. That was one that,
Yeah.
we had come up with years ago, to put pilings on each side of the rocks in a cement form going out over
Can
that
I-
side.
I'm sorry, okay. I just feel like life is complicated enough at the moment, if we didn't have to
Let's
deal with
not
trying to figure
discuss
out
it.
where people are gonna fish, I think we got bigger fish to fry, pardon me, so.
All right, well, I think this is a lot different than what we had seen before, and it was really scary before, and that's why I was down there measuring everything. I still, as I had said before, I know a lot of people that have in the wheelchairs, and that ramp going around is just, and I know we have handicap requirements, I know the ADA and the FEMA and everything have put a lot of restraints on us to do this. I think this is a better looking building than size-wise than we had anticipated. I still would like to see the concession stand downstairs. I really have a problem with that being up that high and going all the way around. Either you're going this way or you're going this way. It's still a long way to go in a wheelchair, on crutches, on walkers, things like that.
Would you trade the concession stand downstairs for moving the police office and the lifeguard station upstairs?
Yes.
Lifeguards-
Well, not the lifeguard
Lifeguard
station.
stand needs to be on the first floor.
The
in case
first
they need-
aid, where are
Well, if
we?
he's
The
on the
first
second floor,
aid,
it's actually has better visibility.
the first aid, the police can go upstairs. But first aid should be downstairs.
Well, maybe, Cheryl, can we do this? If we can ask Neil to then just come back to us and help us understand what we're talking about if we have a concession stand on that. Sorry.
Lands here, I don't know which one I'm looking at.
Well,
What
I'm
about
afraid
the
that,
concern about putting kitchen equipment on the first floor in the flood zone?
yeah, I don't like that idea. If I was a concessionaire, I wouldn't wanna have $100,000 worth of kitchen equipment in the flood zone. And the other thing is, I think that will put it over the cost that you're allowed to spend to renovate the existing building.
Martha?
Well, I go back to the question of, I think we have to consider whether we even need a concessionaire stand at the beach, because as Pam has indicated, the current concessionaire is losing money. Maybe we can, think of a more creative way. I mean, I come back to the idea of food trucks. When would we have them? By special invitation. And I thought, as an experiment this summer, could we try on maybe a Friday and a Saturday night, inviting a food truck to the beach, high quality, to see, to gauge public response, to see how they would respond? Because not having a concession, first of all, would save a lot of money, might open up repurposed space in the existing building.
I think it's a great idea.
I just think it's something we need to explore and not automatically assume
Yeah.
we have to have a concession stand.
Yeah, we
we can
out
talk
of that
about
all
that.
around.
Yeah,
And
well,
I agree, I think maybe you don't need a concession stand.
so I think that's something
Yeah.
we have to pursue further.
Mhm.
And I don't know if there's special hookups, electrical or otherwise for these things, but,
Tow trucks come with everything they need.
And the other issue I have is the police storage. I mean, I know they have some stuff stored there, and I don't know historically how it got there or why it's there, and does it need to be there? They have a big police station.
We
They
have
a
asked them,
truck.
they have requested to keep it, they do say they need it.
But
what
what's
I-
there?
I kind of agree with Martha a little bit. I'd like to see it or get some video of it to see if the space can be reduced. Because for them, somebody described it the other day as having, space for oil, okay? They have a full office at the boat club where they have their equipment and they have files, etc. That office was supposed to be shared by the harbor master, and he's never gotten a key. Nor does he want a key because he prefers to work out of his home. But it just seems that, from the picture that was drawn here, that there's an awful lot of space for things, I don't know what's in there. And if it's a valid point, I'm okay with it.
Can I make a suggestion? We visited and we weren't able to get in as a committee. It sounds like Cheryl, you were able to get in, but I suggest we just arrange another visit. For those of us who are available, maybe even on a Friday morning as an example, something like that. And just go over with someone from, Darien PD and have, we'll ask questions and we'll see what kind of answers. And for those of you who understand what's happening at the boat club, it's be helpful to kind of connect the dots here as well.
I mean, it just may have historically happened and just continued on, and, and they have a big truck with, a locked bag. And I mean, if they don't use it every day, why can't they store it at the police station and bring it with them, whatever it is?
There wasn't much in there that I can say was really important, but they said they needed it and they wanted a
Well,
window.
it keeps
But they
coming
could
up as
use
a question and
small-
we don't have an answer, so.
It was an 8 by 12 room when I measured it. Here it is, 8 by 12. So they said they could use a smaller room, and if it was waterproof, that they would keep more things in there and write reports in there and stuff like that. But I don't know. I mean, I'm not gonna argue with them and say you can't have it. I mean, I'm not about to do that. But, I don't know. I think your idea of going down there and looking at it again and taking note and
So
see
we'll
what
try
they
to
want
set
to put in
something
it.
up, maybe we'll circulate some dates between now and the next meeting, if that's a possibility.
I think we should ask the police department to specifically articulate their
Exactly,
needs
yeah.
and why there are no alternatives. It's
I
very
think
simple.
another possible option that's been used at a bunch of clubs and is give them a trailer. I know some of the stuff in there is like diving equipment and equipment they need if they gotta raise a boat, like a compressor and some other stuff. Well, the police boat's down here and this stuff's up here. And maybe put the stuff in a trailer that can be taken off-site and off-season, and it's parked down near the boat club. And when they need to access the diving gear and the rescue gear and stuff like that, then it's right there. It's not halfway across the parking lot.
You mean a trailer type, like a pod or something like that they could,
Well, it could
that
be-
would take up
it could-
parking area?
It could be a pod, it'd take up one parking space.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not talking about a semi, just, an 8 by 12 trailer that would just.
Okay, so I think,
There's-
yeah,
there's
it's a
options.
great question, yeah.
We have to go, so if we could maybe, I'd like to offer one suggestion too, at the bottom floor, the lifeguard rooms should, if we can, see both sides of the beach. So today, it'd be nice to have, the first aid and their room with windows on each side.
Great.
We do have to go.
Okay,
I think it's creative.
we'll take care of getting the, laptop.
Yes, I will text.
I'll plan on coming over anyways.
Okay. Yeah.
Before I go, I would just, I know later on the agenda is discussion of the schedule for the rest of the year.
Yes.
I would really respectfully request that these meetings not be on the same night as the Park and Rec Commission because
Yeah.
it's very difficult for Pam and I, really should be down with us at DNR now. We have a full agenda there and you're a key commission member as well, so
Yeah.
there's
Yeah,
three
I
proposed
think there's
dates
three
that
dates
that
and we'll just-
overlap and it's
Yep.
it's creating short shrift to both. both meetings and they're both equally
Can you
important, so.
just check off quickly the 3 dates that overlap? So-
Right, and
so
then the
we can
reason I
get to
did that,
quickly?
the reason I did that was toward the end of the year where I felt that
And we
perhaps
don't know
meetings
though.
wouldn't, I
Well, we
know we don't
just-
know.
You know what,
It's
just, if you could
August
just check them off.
21st, August 21st, November 20th, and December
Ah,
8th.
okay. August 21st, so we'll figure out it.
Thank you, I really would appreciate that.
Thank
Lori,
you.
will you say that again?
August 21st,
November 18th, and what's in
The December date, it's
December
December
20th.
18th.
Thank you, guys. Okay,
Pam, just real quick, could you do a sniff test on, you know, maybe following what Martha said, is to get the food truck to show up for a couple weekends or something?
Yep, I just need to double check about our contract with.
Yeah, whatever, I mean, just tell us what is
And
feasible.
when they close, and if they're not gonna be open, it's really important that they're,
I don't
They're-
think they've been open in the evenings.
I don't think so either,
No.
and they basically have told me that they don't give any money to the town, on the pear tree side.
I don't think we need to get into the, kind of, yeah, yeah.
Okay, you wanna do this?
Yes,
And
thank
I will
you,
look into that,
thank you.
thanks.
And then I'll follow up with you about trying to arrange it, you know, not trying, but arranging a visit with the PD.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so it sounds like we're keeping an open mind, is that kind of, you know, with some things for Neil to think about? Like
Yeah,
like
no,
the jetty and,
As I said, I think it's a dramatic improvement from the first draft, which is what's supposed to happen in time. I like it, curved roof or slanted roof, maybe with silver panels, whatever. I think it's interesting and we should move forward with this type of design.
Okay. Okay. So Neil, it sounds like, I'm sorry, Martha.
Well, I was gonna say, I think it is a very nice design, but I'm not certain it's needed. It seems to me, I mean, I looked at the surveys, everybody wants open space, natural space, and this is much less looming than the original proposal, but nevertheless, it's still a raised structure at a very small beach. And you know, it takes away from the naturalness of the beach. And no matter what aspect of the survey questions you look at, rental and event space were near the bottom of the list.
I think from my perspective,
But
I've taken a rental and event space off
Well, this is-
out of our
well,
conversation. I
Well,
mean,
what
we can
kind
keep
of
bringing it up,
space is
but
this? I mean, in other words,
it's a space to enjoy open space. In fact, you probably couldn't find a more open space than the Long Island Sound.
Right.
The beach on the Long Island Sound. So I think what we've done here is created the ability for folks to better enjoy one of our premier open spaces, and maybe one of the premier open spaces on the planet, the Sound. And I think by adding in the ADA accessibility, we're kind of adding the ability for folks who really are very, very limited in their ability to enjoy this as an open space in town, to now fully enjoy it in a way that doesn't exist today. So I understand the point, I understand the reference back to the survey that's been taken. You know, numbers are numbers, or surveys are surveys, you can interpret them any way you want. I choose to interpret it as sound is open space, and I think what we're attempting to do here is create a vehicle or an ability for folks to enjoy that open space in a way that doesn't really exist today.
Well, I mean, again, going back to a rehab of the existing building and taking, and I liked the idea of the decking, you know, out between the two jetties. You could put some kind of roof structure or pergola
Yeah,
or
but Martha,
tables,
we've
I
already
mean, you
we've
know,
already discussed that you can't rehab the building with the affordability of the FEMA problem.
Well, if you don't have a concession in there, and you can do the bathrooms, I mean, what do we have to do in the interior? What are you having to rehab, you know, extensively?
You need to put some sort of flood prevention in there so it doesn't flood when the tide comes up.
Well, I mean, that building has been built since 1972, and there
I
have
don't-
been numerous floods, and it's still standing.
I just don't think it's the right solution to go with. I
Well, the
would like
building
to
is
sit.
gonna be there anyway.
I would like to sit on the top deck and look at the Long Island Sound.
Okay, well, fine.
Mark?
This is a seasonal building or a year-round building?
I would view it as a seasonal building.
without heat or air conditioning?
Well, it's a question, I know that question has come up, but if it's seasonal, you know, by my definition, seasonal is it gets shut down, it gets, you know, winterized, and, so I don't see the need, by that definition, I wouldn't see the need to.
Because I think that question might still be open even.
I'm sure it is, because
I
we,
mean-
you know, I think there's a lot of details around all of this that we haven't, you know, we've kind of parked, that we
It
have to
just-
kind of get to now.
Just one more thing, and maybe it's obvious, but it's not obvious to me. Something like a pavilion, would that have to be raised up high? That is to say, a building without walls?
You mean like a gazebo?
Yeah,
A big
No.
gazebo.
would not have to be raised up. How about a building like that with garage doors or something instead of real
If
permanent?
it's just an open structure, the answer is no. If you have usable space in there, like bathrooms, concessions, space that you can use for other purposes, yes,
Then it does have to be raised.
that's
Yes.
right.
Okay, understand. But we already have one of those buildings.
Going back to the event space on the deck now, would that be locked? I mean, you know, the paddle hut is locked. You know, somebody has
Yeah.
to admit people in. Are you gonna leave that open to the public at all times?
So,
You know, you've gotta think that through.
well, to give you my initial thought would be, you know, this, first of all, there is open space up on that upper deck, so I don't think, I wouldn't envision us having some type of a chain link fence around it that would prevent folks from getting up there in the evening.
No, I wasn't talking about.
But the enclosed space, I would say, would be open during the day when lifeguards were on duty. I think, you know, those existing buildings already have some level of minimal maintenance being done by Parks and Recs, picking up garbage or cleaning things up, so I think, you know, if it's seasonal only, you know, there'd be some minimal maintenance that would take place, and then I would say at night, you know, in the off hours, the enclosed space would be locked. But that's, the decking space, the open space in between would still be accessible and open, so theoretically, you could get up there and sit up there, you know, to your heart's content.
The person in the guard booth could open the space when he or she gets there and lock it at the end of the day at night, so that.
Yeah, I mean, we'd have to leave that to Parks and Recs, but I would say, I think those kind of questions are dovetailing, right, in terms of use. Seasonal, I don't see that it would need to be conditioned, and certainly wouldn't need to be air conditioned, because I can imagine that breezes would be just magnificent coming through there during the day. And, you know, certainly accessible for folks, you know, through the evening, wonderful sunsets, folks getting up there on wheelchairs to see sunsets, and otherwise locked, you know. So, you know, my initial thoughts, I mean, it's your point, some more we'd have to think through, but just my initial thinking. Cheryl?
Well, when I'm looking at these new plans, I'm noticing that there is no kitchen area. And now you just said that this is going to be seasonal. This is the first that we've heard of that, because at our last
Well,
meeting.
I just asked a question,
Well,
so
at our
that's
la-
what.
let me finish. At our last meeting and on this packet of designs, we have a little kitchen area
You mean
in
a
a flexible space
You mean a
room.
catering area?
Well, catering,
Right,
it was a
catering,
sink,
So
and
this, yeah.
as Pam explained, it was a sink area and a counter area where you could set up food and have it catered in. And that it would be rentable space. Now tonight, all of a sudden, it's not. So I'm a little confused as to where
Let me-
we've changed the path here.
Yeah, let me explain.
It was always,
Well, let me,
let me just
okay.
keep my train of
you're just
thought.
gonna- Yeah.
It was always about having income and having
No, it
rental
wasn't.
space.
I'm sorry, I have to-
With
I have to-
flexible
I'm sorry,
space.
Cheryl, I have to correct you.
Well-
That's not the charge of the commission.
It's not the charge.
Well,
But it's what Pam had said.
I mean, our charge is to implement what the commission has requested, and I've clarified that
Okay.
multiple times. It was a request of Pam's,
Right.
but never a mandate or a charge from the commission.
And neither was the flexible space, actually.
Well, the flexible space is the double meeting space, 2 rooms that could be used for rentable space and events was not. And once I recognized that, I went back to the commission. I had that removed and replaced with flexible community space. So, and to your point about how did this all happen so suddenly, I think I explained it's a process. You know, we asked Neil to present something last week, he's come back this week. nothing's cast in stone, but I'm hoping that it's clear that it's kind of there is a process here. And you're right, so in this iteration, the catering kitchen has been removed. Why is the catering kitchen removed? For a number of reasons, not the least of which is it's not meant to accommodate events. It's not for that purpose, and also it's been removed to kind of manage more effectively this, a smaller footprint. So there's a clear explanation why it's not there. I mean, if you feel as though we should ask these guys to find a way to put it back in, we can do that. I mean, that's...
No, as long as I understand what direction we're going in now.
Well, I'm not sure what direction we're going in.
Well,
I think
I
what
know it's a little
we're
bit
still,
off the
well, we're still in the
baseline.
territory of exploring different options. We haven't gone in any direction yet. We've gone in fact two, polar opposite directions. So, and I think, it's kind of like interpolation, right? You kind of go from one side to another until you work to the center here. And I think we're attempting to get the sense of the committee to figure out which direction we should be going in. So we haven't yet asked these guys to go in any one direction or another yet. It's really just kind of present us with a couple of options for us to consider. I happen to like this option. I think it's probably pretty transparent on my part that I like it. It's like, I think
So let me
I like the idea of going up. I
let
like
me
the
just
idea of
understand-
ADA accessibility.
I know. To me, that's
Very important to me. the
it's
ADA
very,
accessibility.
it's. I know we have a lot of constraints. I'm well aware of that, but it's a lot of going around or back and forth or however we have to get up there. That's why I really like the concession stand downstairs. And I think that if we talk to the guy that owns the concession stand, rents the concession stand, maybe we can come up with a different option of not having a lot of expensive equipment in there. And that way, it wouldn't be a detrimental
Well, I
expense.
think, Martha raised a great point, eliminating the concession facility altogether. I think that's probably a more reasonable option than attempting to kind of have one that's really a half of one,
You can't have somebody carry sandwiches in, because if you want a tuna fish sandwich and he doesn't have it, because he can't make it, as opposed to having, food service on site where he can make sandwiches fresh. Otherwise, they're carrying sandwiches that are hours old or whatever.
He's only going from the deli in his town
But
to the
yeah, but he has to make the sandwiches to bring over to Pear Tree.
well,
Well, if somebody can't get a tuna fish, they'll have to get XL.
No, but
I
the
mean, a
point
lot
is
of
it's
times
not
he doesn't
fresh.
have hot dogs, so I mean,
that's-
it's the same
That's
concept.
not a valid option in my opinion.
I mean, I don't know.
Well, look, I think we can explore it. I mean, I think Martha raised a great point. We can explore, experiment a bit with having food trucks come in and see how that works. Neil raised the concept of food trucks right from the first, from the outset.
Right.
Which I think, and I think we knew, like, when Neil raised it, that we wouldn't likely have a hybrid of food trucks and concession and cake. It would be typically one or the other, right? Because you have people competing with one. So I think it's a question we have to, I'm not sure we're in a position to,
I mean, we still need
Settle
a
it.
ramp to get to the second story anyway.
There's nothing
you do
to
need a
do
ramp.
about that.
And, I think.
You need a ramp to get to the main gazebo.
And
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
if you go,
Yeah.
if you go to a couple of different sites around town, and you go to the second floor looking out on the sound, it's a whole different experience than being down at ground level. It's night and day. And the fact that you could provide a limited amount of space up at level 17 or whatever it is, for people to take a chair up there, or there'll be tables and chairs up there and look out, I think that's a big benefit. I think people are gonna like that.
I mean, in a way, we're adding, multiple additional dimensions to what is today kind of a single-dimension beach. Right now, there's one place, it's the ground level. So we're adding multiple dimensions now, which really, in a way, is kind of magnifying, I think, multiplying the value of the beach. If I could put it that way.
I'm not sure I can see my way to need for an elevated structure, but I mean, can you see just a deck above the existing structure? No buildings per se, just railing all around if you want people to be able to experience the view? Do we need to actually have a room and a concession stand up there? I mean, you get the experience. Right now, people are very happy sitting on Pear Tree. Practically everybody brings their own food. I don't see much action at the concession stand.
Well, setting the concession stand aside, because I think we're kind of agreeing we should explore that. I don't see the downside. In fact, I only see positive. Once you go up and once you establish a deck, to have an enclosed space, once again, to be up there, have an
Now, if
enclosed
you
space.
think it's seasonal, then why does it need to be enclosed? I mean, in the summer, why,
Well-
you know, I mean, I could see maybe having an awning structure perhaps, or a pergola or something to give a little shade, but why do you actually have to have a
Well,
physical
I think if you've got some,
room?
if you have some furniture in there, I mean, you know, once again, it's also a great question, but, you know, like, I guess if you've got some furniture, you like to protect what you have there and to make it a nicer space for folks to, you know, to congregate. It's a great question.
Because it would be less imposing, I mean, if it was simply a deck.
Well, look, for me, that doesn't
No,
seem
I-
imposing. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's a very elegant style of a solution. I mean, you see it on, you know, for those,
No, I mean,
you
I-
can see
I-
that type of a solution in lovely places all around the world, you know. It's on a premier piece of real estate, it's a lovely solution. I don't consider it imposing. That is 4 foot higher. Now, I realize I'm kind of advocating and lobbying, it sounds like very strongly, but just to answer the question, I mean, this is 4 foot higher than the roof line of the existing building, so I don't see kind of the, I mean, you could call it that, but it's not my sense that it's imposing. I think it's kind of fairly elegant. And, you know, we've got these block buildings that are, I think they're nicer, you know, so, I mean, in all fairness to whoever designed those and put them there.
Well,
So
they're
I
still
think,
going, you know, you missed the point that they're still going to be there.
no, I understand, but they'll be screened, right, because they'll be skinned. And so we have the opportunity to kind of create something that's architecturally very beautiful as well as functionally, you know, very effective as well, so.
Can we put vinyl siding on the building that's there now? Like shingles, they make vinyl shingles or vinyl siding? To make it look more, to make it look more New England-y and rather than some, what did you just say, skin coated, I mean?
No, I said reskinning. I mean, basically, Neil's proposal is to build a building around a building, you know, so. And once you've done that, you can put whatever kind of,
If you were to attach the shingles directly to, or the siding directly to the existing building, that would count toward the renovation of the building, so that would
Okay.
mean you'd have less money to spend inside. Our concept was to actually put a skin around it that doesn't touch the building, that stands off from the building, so, and then spans over the building, so you're encapsulating the building
building.
without touching it.
and you're no longer constrained by the FEMA requirement
Right.
in terms of the 50% rule.
So in other words, you'd sort of, if you were using the downstairs buildings, you'd have kind of an entry with a space.
You had, like, was it,
Some
is
sort of
it
a screen
inches,
that.
inches between the old building and the new building, or are you talking feet?
Probably inches.
Okay.
Not feet. So-
Is this a contemporary look, or are you going to go for a more nautical in line with, you know, the guardhouse?
We haven't gotten to that level of detail yet. I mean, that,
Go a long way.
right now, we're looking at a massing model at 3/64 inches a foot, so it's all right. Yeah, 3/64. So we have a long way to go to get to those details.
Okay. But the skin was news to me. I pictured that we were just simply going to see piers. Now, when you put a skin on though, where would the ramp be in reference to the, well, I guess it's the
Well,
skin.
This
going
screen
outside.
would be similar to a concept that is popular now called a range screen, which is a screen that is, in most cases, it's actually attached to the wall of an existing building.
But you couldn't here.
But
no.
in this case, we can hold it off. So you wouldn't really see the
Oh,
concrete
building.
block behind it.
No, but I mean, the ADA ramp would be outside the skin.
Yeah, that would be outside then, yes. Similar to what you see here.
So I think just to translate, you know, I mean, we have the ability then to create a look that's dramatically different and not limited by the block structure that exists there today.
Right.
So, okay. Neil, what would you like to hear from us beyond what you've heard so far? I think it sounds like we maybe have some things to think about when things
Yeah.
settle in, but what would you like to hear?
I think at this point, I'm not sure we can go any further without
Mhm.
getting input from this committee regarding these open decisions
Yeah.
that we're grappling with. Are we doing a concession? Are we doing food trucks? Are we doing flexible space?
Mhm.
You know,
Okay.
those kinds of things. I think if you can get a consensus on that, that would give us a direction that we could then take the next step with.
Mhm. Okay. So I guess what I would.
Brian, anything to add to that?
I agree.
Yeah, that's
Makes
great.
sense.
So what I'd suggest is maybe we let this settle and and maybe set an objective for ourselves at our next meeting to just kind of try to go down a list of things that we've got to make decisions on and start to make a range of decisions and allow some time in between. Does that
Yes.
make sense to you guys?
No, and the question is, where is Weston and Sampson? Are they stopped at this point in the process until, what are,
Well, I wouldn't say they're stopped. They can continue doing work. We've asked them to look into the height of the berms, the sand dunes, because we recognize that there's some conflicting objectives. On one hand, people want to be able to drive in, park their car, see over the dunes to the water. On another hand, people don't want the beach to be washed away every time there's a storm. And so the dunes do have to be a certain height if they're going to be effective. And the question is, what is that height? And how can they show us examples of that? So that's what we've asked them to do. That's, I think, the most important feedback we need from them at this point. But I guess now we can ask them specific questions about
The
how
jetty.
to put a deck on top of the existing jetties, what that gets into. I know they're working on the new boat ramp. I think they were also working on an idea for the plantings along the road.
So Neil, when do you think they would be in a position to come back? Because I took Jack's kind of presentation to us as really a survey of a range of elements that could possibly be used, but not really a plan for how it would be used here.
Yeah.
When would you expect those guys to be in a position to come back to us and maybe a bit more comprehensive, holistic kind of integrated view of things?
I don't have an answer, but I can find out
Okay.
and get back to
That'd
you
be helpful,
tomorrow.
yeah.
They, as you may recall, 2 weeks ago when we left the meeting, we weren't going to present anything tonight.
Of course.
And so I told them, rather than, spending time driving down here for this meeting, we would do the listening and then
Great.
pass the
Yeah,
information back
no,
to them.
it's all good.
And we knew that, afterwards, that most of the discussion would center around the building itself, so.
Okay,
But I think that they're ready to
perfect,
come back pretty soon.
yeah.
I was gonna ask, with respect to the dunes, and they may be able to solve the visual problem, but we still have the issue of either you take away from the beach or you take away from the parking.
Right?
Is,
That's the
could
other
you
issue.
ask them, is there any way you could put, I don't know how you would describe it, as a hedge of grasses or some other kind of low-growing bushes which would not obstruct the visual, might help some with the sand, and for beachgoers at least, they wouldn't be up against the bumpers of the car. I mean, I don't know if something like that is
I will ask
possible.
them that, yeah.
I have a question for Weston and Sampson, if you could please find it. One of these plans had a concrete boardwalk on it, going
Well,
around.
One was a concrete sidewalk along the edge of the parking lot, along the west beach and the south beach. The other one was I believe, a wooden boardwalk that meandered around the dunes and created a slightly different experience.
Okay, yes, the concrete walkway is between the parking lot and the sand dunes.
Correct.
Okay. My question is, if FEMA allows you to put a concrete walkway there, then why wouldn't they allow us to put a wall, a 6-inch wall along to, instead of the berms, to use the wall?
Yeah, I think it's because the wall just reflects energy, and that's why I think it's frowned upon as a, you know, if you have wave energy and it comes against the wall, it is translated to somebody down the line, but the dunes actually absorb energy.
So you're not causing somebody else to get water bounced their direction.
It's a question we'll put to them, you know, but that's, they've said a number of times.
That's something they can pursue, but they're not.
Yeah, well, plus it's a FEMA,
Yeah, we
So-
had heard that it was FEMA
so
that,
move on.
that
I
didn't.
mean,
didn't want
FEMA
to.
says no.
Well, I
you
just
can't,
wanted to know why, if we can put concrete there, why we can't put
because
a
concrete
wall
isn't a
there. I mean,
structure, and it's not buffering the wall. The wall is getting hit. The water's gonna wash over the concrete and do whatever it's gonna do, just like it'll wash off of the wooden deck or
well,
whatever.
we have the berms on the side, on the
Well,
other
but-
side to
but-
stop it.
The point is, a wall stops it.
Mhm.
A deck of any kind, concrete, berms, or whatever, is gonna mitigate it somewhat. It just,
Just wanted to know.
Okay, so I think, you know, we're developing a list of things that I think we've got to come to some decision on, and my suggestion, once again, if that works for you guys, is that if things kind of cogitated it, and when we get together next time, we'll just, maybe just work through that list.
Could you help me be a little more clear on when is our next meeting?
Yeah, our next meeting is the 2nd, July 2nd, so it's, once again.
July 3rd.
uh,
I have down here July 3rd.
Second
Oh.
on the list.
I think, yeah, so it's on July, it's July 2nd, and Pam is,
Okay,
yeah,
on this list too.
It's a new list.
Oh, I didn't get that.
and I think the thinking was it's July 2nd because of July 3rd.
it's a Wednesday, there's or.
No,
It's not great that week.
I mean, we can push it. Are we suggesting moving it to the 10th, maybe?
Do you have another copy of that list of,
I have, oh, David has to, oh, I have, hold on. So, it sounds like we're moving on to the next item on our agenda here. We're incorporating that into the prior conversation, that's just saying.
I pushed this along, didn't I?
You need to give us the edited dates.
Yes.
You wrote, please.
thank you. Now I'll be up to speed. Okay, because this is,
You got one?
this is the other one that I had, so this is it.
Yes.
Some of us printed our
Oh, that's missing.
agenda with
What are those?
Those are the ones that are in conflict.
Okay.
Very fast losing control of this meeting here. At least I know it.
And that's, okay, July 2nd is a Tuesday.
Yes, so let's start with that one. Do we,
You need to start relying on something.
there you go. Do we want to keep that, do we want to move it to the week of the 8th?
Why don't we take a couple days to think about it and send you an email?
Yeah, okay, so that's great.
So the 8th,
So-
it would be the 8th or the 2nd, right?
Well, we
Yes.
need to figure out
So
space.
what's the
We need to find where the space is.
the week of the 8th?
Right, it would be the week of the 8th. So, question number one?
And we have we got a time limit as far as when we have to notice it for.
I think you need a week to warn the meetings.
Yeah. So, how about if we do this? Maybe, because we don't have Diana with us, we don't have Lori and Pam, why don't we take this list as well? Take a look at it, we'll reach out to folks and just start to canvass people on these days, if that's okay with everybody, rather than trying to figure it out here. Okay.
So we really ought to be together meeting anyway.
Well,
You want to go to the other meeting and we're.
no, I mean, I'll finish up sounds like we're good with where we are. I don't wanna force some further kind of conversation artificially here. It sounds like we've gotten to a point where it makes sense to move on. We're good with that? Okay,
Yes.
great. So Neil, Brian, Rob, I mean, you're gonna hang around a bit, but once again, thanks so much, because I realize,
Thank you.
including up to this morning, you know, things were not fully baked here, and,
This is a big help visually.
Yeah.
No.
We thought so.
that's amazing. And even being able to see the existing buildings kind of juxtaposed to the new structures is really helpful as well, so.
And maybe we're not ready yet, but I still would like to see at ground level with the existing building, a series of decks and, you know, to make that a kind of quote, an event space that people could use, and it could be cantilevered over the water because there is a drop off, you know, from the end of that patio there. I don't know if I have any support on that. I mean, if nobody
What I
else
really like
would
about-
like to see that.
Please, come on.
What I really like about this is that it doesn't mess with any of the beach space. I think you could tell by my question last time.
Yeah.
It bothered me that this was hanging up there over
Right,
beach space.
right, right.
And this is now not where it is, this doesn't.
Yeah, that, we quickly realized when we put together those schemes that there was more second floor or elevated program area than was downstairs. That created issues, so. But it's a process, one learns, so.
Well, we have you know, not to force something, and we don't have a vote on here, but, you know, this question of renovate and what you're asking for, Martha, I mean, it's work that we'd have to ask Neil to do. You can get the sense of the folks that are here in terms of whether we, at this juncture, want to proceed with that. Is that what you're asking us to do?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're not ready to reconfigure the interior of the building yet because we don't know about the police issue.
Yeah.
I'm assuming the concession
I'm just trying to understand what you're asking us to.
in that level. Well, I actually think if you were to rehab the bathrooms, I don't know, you know, how you reconfigure or spruce up the interior. I don't think a whole lot of work needs to be done, especially if you don't have a kitchen in the building. Perhaps you could put some fascia board to improve the look, and I thought if you know, it's just my thought.
Yeah,
And
well, I'm just trying to understand,
I'm not an architect
I want
or
to
a
make sure it's
designer, but I
captured.
just went there today and I looked at the railing and I said, you know, it's a drop off, but if we could put a nice deck over between that, you could create a big space. You could put tables, you could put a roof, as I said, or a pergola,
Mhm.
and I think it would look like a whole new building, really. And people would like that. I mean, you know, high on the list was renovate bathrooms. It wasn't create event space, and I think this would be.
Well, we're not
You
creating
know what?
event space. I mean,
Well,
Can you get the
creating
event
some
space?
sort of space, you
You're
know.
not creating, it's not event space.
I
It's
mean, if
not
you
the
call
big
getting
event.
together with some
Okay,
friends with a
whatever.
bottle of wine and an event, okay, it's an event space. Yeah.
It's some sort of space. I mean, I don't know what
Let
it
me
is.
clarify.
I would like you to go back over, as we had this discussion, because obviously there are two camps here. Just exactly how much money it is that you can use and what you can do with it, if you're just renovating.
Would you like to know the answer?
Wasn't that 66
I just want to be
30 something?
reminded of
Yeah.
exactly how much it is and how far that would go.
Yeah, I'll give you the precise numbers here.
Yeah, I found that the other day, someone I was talking to.
Basically,
While you're looking
it's,
for that, Mike.
well, I
you
have
got
it. Yeah, I have it. So for the restroom component, it's $26,000, and for what's referred to as the kiosk on the town chart, it's $65,000. So that would be our budget.
26 and 65.
20, yeah, and once again, you gotta go back and look at the original town sheet, because that total number that Jeremy originally shared with us is kind of split out between a lot of components, including the gazebo, which has, I think,
Does he say that it all has to be treated for the individual components, or can you just take the gross number and say?
No, you have to treat, each structure has a dollar value attributed to it, and you can only use 50% of that dollar value.
But
so-
again, yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, so,
So
let me
the
just-
gazebo as well?
no, what I'm saying is, Jeremy had given us a number that was like over $300,000 originally, and that included a number of things, including the boat ramp, including the gazebo. So the value, that was the aggregate value of all the structures at Patrick Point Beach. So when you talk about the elements that we're talking about renovating, you basically can only use the number that's attributed to that particular structure. So I'll just repeat it. For the restrooms, all we have is $26,000 to spend, well, $26,150. And for the kiosk, which is the space with the concession area in it today, it's $65,155.
But again, if you don't have a concession in there.
I'm with you.
Right.
So
That
let me,
doesn't
let me
sound
just,
like a
so let me
bad
just ask
budget
this then.
thing.
So Neil,
Yeah.
in our, once again, recognizing how much you've done to date, in our RFP and in your response, we had asked for, unless it was kind of, there was a foregone conclusion that we couldn't do a renovation, for some kind of a set of concepts around a renovation. So I guess I'm asking you before I kind of put it out here about, that's your understanding as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, look, I mean, to settle the issue, because I suspect it's going to continue to come up, I'm not opposed to asking Neil to come back with a couple of different views as to what a renovation option would look like. If that's what you, is that what you're
Yeah,
asking?
I would suggest,
Just want to make sure I understand.
because we have not nailed down the police storage
Yeah.
and whatnot, I would suggest perhaps rather than even worrying about the interior of the building, maybe just talk about exterior decking space and, just a nice design that would be at ground level, which would expand the sitting area around that building and, give people a new view and a nice space to sit in.
Okay. So what you're really saying, once again, because we have to give this guy clear direction
No,
here,
I
is
meant,
what the solution that you're describing, if it were implemented, would retain the existing concession facilities, as in the current state that they are.
the existing exterior buildings. I'm not saying there would be a concession in there or a
Okay, so,
storage.
right,
So I'm
the-
saying, don't even bother to redesign that because we don't have the
Got
right
it.
information.
So
at
hand
this
in
point.
hand, that could also incorporate the option of eliminating the concession
Yeah,
and going with food trucks.
or I can wait a bit, but it seems to me, I would just like to see if we could create something nice that would be visually appealing and a nice experience for people at ground level.
No, I understand that, but I'm just trying to make sure that we're agreeing on what we're asking Neil. So I think what I'm hearing you ask Neil is spend $65,000 on the exterior of the building, on improvements to the exterior
Well,
of the
no,
building.
I
To the
haven't said,
interior.
I mean, you gotta do
Well,
something
no,
on
I
the
think,
interior.
that's why,
You may wanna put in new windows, I mean, but I think you got a $65,000
So-
budget.
Can I help?
well, I think we all should help, because by the time these guys leave, they have to have a very precise understanding of what we're asking.
Well, I don't want him to even do the building right now, because, again, we haven't hammered down the
I'm
details.
not sure that look, I'm not challenging, I'm just trying to understand what you're.
No, but that's what I'm saying, if I knew the police storage was out, and knew for sure, well, I don't think it makes sense to have a concession stand down there.
Mhm.
I don't think a concession is needed personally, but I'm just saying, why have him spend time drawing a configuration of the interior
I'm with you.
when we haven't got the information for him to be able to
He's
do
not
it,
trying
so that's a
something.
waste of his time.
I'm with you.
He's not doing anything on the interior, it's all exterior.
Remember, he only has $65,000 to spend.
Okay, so that's windows and some fascia board perhaps.
Well, that's what I'm asking you,
Yes,
what you would
yes,
like.
and then a nice outdoor event space, and it couldn't touch, I know it could be,
Yep.
in very close proximity, but it cannot touch, and see what he can come up with in terms of a nice design,
Yeah, no, that's
I don't
good.
know, how do you feel?
So let's go
about
around
that?
and just add or subtract
Yeah.
anything that Martha has said, and then by the end of the exercise, hopefully Neil will have a clear understanding of what we're asking him to do.
Very briefly, a quick review of the RFQ as amended, if not precluded by evaluation and analysis undertaken in Phase A, which is mostly geology and
Mm-hmm.
mapping. At least one design alternative should be based upon the rehabilitation, adaptation, and extension of the existing Pear Tree Beach concession building.
Yeah, no,
That's what we're looking at.
well, that's very generalized, because I wrote that statement. So I think what I'm asking now that we're at this stage is to see if we can't we can leave it like that and ask Neil to come back and take poetic license, or I'm just asking if.
It does, It doesn't say only. Do we want it to say only to do
No, it
that?
doesn't say only, but we only have $65,000. So if you tell me I have $65,000 and you leave it to me, I may spend it differently than Cheryl might spend it.
That's true.
We're asking you.
Yeah, I would like
The
to make
roof
the
is
point that
solid.
if you don't have the concession in that block, you're probably not limited by the $65,000 because you can call everything else storage. The
Okay.
concession is really the item that tips it into habitable space.
Okay,
I think
that's a
that's
revelation.
true.
Okay,
Yeah.
you did, thank you.
Well, Rob did it.
All right.
On our first bunch of schematics, this little one that you gave us a couple of weeks ago, you have here one of the designs for approach 1. Downstairs, first aid, lifeguard shack, lifeguard storage, police storage, concession. So you have that in this one drawing, and the bathroom's on the other side. On the next one, you have the same thing. I'm missing one. First aid, first aid, lifeguard shack, storage, police storage, and concession. So I agree with Martha. I mean, it was in the RFP, we have talked about it. I would just like to see a concept of everything on the first floor, using the buildings that are there now, with a deck and some sort of dining space outside. Maybe eventually we could put an awning, collapsible awning out to shade people, put out chairs and tables with umbrellas like they have at the boat club, and do something like that. So yes, I would like to see a concept at the next.
Without a concession area.
I think you can draw, I think it's all like, you have it all on your computer, so you can squish it in over here and take it out over in this drawing.
That's not what I'm understanding, I apologize, but.
I would like to see it with the concession.
Okay, if it has.
Martha said she doesn't care, she doesn't,
I
Well,
don't want to see it.
she doesn't want to see it.
Well, there are two
I
different
would-
options then, because if it's with the concession, if I understand what Rob is telling
Well,
us, we're
yes.
limited by 65,000.
Right.
And if it's without the concession, there is no limit to how much we can spend.
The concession does not make a great deal of sense in that water does come up, and you're gonna have, at the very least, even if they bring in sandwiches, you're gonna have to have some sort of refrigeration. I mean, I suppose that could be elevated.
There are trade-offs here.
But
Well, I'm trying to keep an open mind on all of this, so,
Well, we all
but I
are.
would like to see,
Well, put it this way, I mean, you consider that building an eyesore. I don't think it's great. I would put some flower boxes on it, I'd change the
Well, it would
windows
be better if it didn't have the
and
porta
improve
potties
the
in front,
doors.
but.
But I
Well,
mean,
yeah.
but I'm saying, if you don't
Okay, it
have
was
to
a,
do
it
a
was a
lot
strong
of.
term, it was a strong wording.
Yeah, no, but if you don't have to do a lot of interior work, as Rob says,
No, no, I'm-
65,000 would probably enable you to spruce up
yeah.
the facility. And if you have a very nice space, it's worth exploring.
No, I'm not
That's all
pushing back, I just wanna, all I'm asking for us
Mr.
to
Chairman,
be
so
somewhat
move on,
precise.
we're kind of talking in circles
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
I mean,
So, Neil-
We understand your point,
Yeah.
we need to
Well, I
move
know, but
on.
I don't know.
We don't know where we're going either.
Yeah.
Well, no, I keep coming back because you both have asked for something different. Cheryl's asking for something with a concession space, and you're asking for something without. Now, I think Neil's agreed to give us a schematic. I don't know if he's agreed to give us
Well,
two
you know
separate
what,
sets.
as I said, how about we just do the exterior decking arrangement? Don't even worry about the existing building, and we may say, hey, that isn't nice enough, or that's great. Let's see what we can do with the existing structure after that.
So what I'm hearing from Martha is she'd like to see the existing structure essentially left as is, maybe painted, whatever, but explore some sort of outdoor dining deck at grade
Yeah, just to make it
that
very
would
nice
give
of
people an
space.
opportunity to dine and look out to the water.
Yes.
And then in that scenario, you just essentially just leave the concession as it is. You wouldn't renovate it, you would leave it as it is. If you want a concession and you want to renovate it, that I think is going to push
The
us
cost
over
up
the
too
cost
high,
limit,
I
and
think
you're going to
so
have to
too.
elevate it.
I agree.
Or eliminate it and have food trucks.
So let's not even cross
So there's
that
no-
bridge.
right, so there-
Let's just look at what you can do on the exterior to make the
Yeah,
area nice.
I'd like to see it.
I agree with that.
Okay, so I'm not as quick as all you guys. So in the context of the 50% rule.
We're not worrying about it right now.
Well, the only way you can not worry about it is if you take the concession out.
Or
We're
leave
not
it-
making
or
the
you
Leave it as
decision.
is.
Just leave it. Don't touch the interiors. Leave
Oh,
the
so
concession.
basically
We're
not
just
touch.
looking at the outside.
Leave the concession, leave everything the way it is.
Add that.
Got it. Okay,
Put a coat of paint on it and.
okay. So that's
and
what we've asked.
Add some sort
Fix
of
them
an
in.
outdoor
Yeah, I
dining.
mean, we still probably could reskin it, but then if you're not building a new roof, it gets into,
Yes.
tricky.
Can't reskin it with leaving as it is now? I mean,
Sure.
I'd like to see some kind of a nicer exterior
Yeah,
than cinder
same.
block
It is brick, it's block
at
on the
one
inside.
point. Brick, cinder block, whatever the hell it is.
Okay, so it sounds like you guys have a sense of what your charge is.
It's this with some sort of a dining deck.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Great. Okay. I support you guys going up and doing that. Any objections? Maybe it's the easiest way to.
I think you,
I don't wanna
I think you have to
belabor
watch
the
out
point,
what you
but
define grade as,
Yeah.
because
What?
if you wanna
Yes.
renovate the gazebo or do anything with the gazebo, or just feel that it's a priority to make the gazebo accessible, is that part of this plan?
Yeah, whatever you can come up with, I mean, you know, I guess we would like it to be ADA.
Right, I think
The whole
if
thing
you
has
leave
to
it
be
alone, you
ADA
don't have
compliant.
to.
Right,
If you renovate it or,
that's your choice,
Yeah.
because our budget is not set,
Yeah.
I mean, at that
Mhm.
point.
Well, wait a minute.
It's
I think
whatever
you just
can
said
do
though,
to
if
make
you
it
wanna
look
fix the
good.
floor, which is cracked, you need to make it ADA accessible.
yes,
Right.
The floor of the gazebo?
Yes.
Oh, really?
Well, that's fine.
But when you said redo it, what do you mean by redoing it? It's staying as it is, right?
With a new floor.
With just a new floor?
Could,
But I think Rob is asking you that question.
could be a similar new structure, a different structure that's similar, it's new.
Well, I talked to the town historian, Mark Castell, and this is not labeled as a historic building. It's been there since the 1800s, but it is a landmark in Darien. And she would prefer that it stayed as is. I'm just saying.
Okay, and that's something we'd have to look into at some point. So,
But I do think we wanna make it ADA accessible, yes.
Yeah, well,
That's fine.
That would be nice somehow.
okay, so that, we're including that in what we've just asked Neil for. Make the gazebo ADA accessible as well.
Well, I don't wanna, I just want him to make a nice space for everybody, leave it up to him, you know, as you say.
Well, that's an approach, but generally the way this works is you give somebody your requirements as opposed to just say, I prefer, you know what? I'm not comfortable with that approach. Let me just be more specific. The reason I'm not comfortable is because I don't want to get to the next meeting and find out that his view of a beautiful solution doesn't jive with anybody's view here. So I think,
The other two meetings, you know, it was not everybody's view.
yeah, well, that's where we've ended up
I don't
with.
understand the confusion, just, are you kind of clear on what I'm suggesting? I mean, yes, it would be nice if the gazebo was ADA compliant, I guess it doesn't necessarily have to be, I leave it up to you in terms of what works well for a total design.
We can present
You know.
a couple
Some floor is
variations.
cracked, right, so that means it's basically,
Okay,
I didn't know.
I'm good with that.
she's the parker.
We can move along. So having said all of that, thank you very much, appreciate that. We'll open it up now to comments from our neighbors and public comment. And what I would just ask that we keep it to, 5 minutes each comment. And please try to keep it relevant to maybe the topic that we've discussed.
Before you begin, if anybody's going to address, I need your name to spell it for me, please, and just your street address. Jim, I have yours, so I'm okay. No, I'm from last time, so.
what we're talking about. That's okay.
Would you like me to put the model back together so you can see?
Could we just put them side by side so we can actually see?
And then you look at it the way it's supposed to be.
That's okay.
So this one goes here, so, and the next one is.
Okay. That's what was said, right? That's right. Okay, up to you, Jim, you want your question or anything?
I mean, my first comment is actually a question for Neil. When you have a 1-inch model and it goes to a 2-inch model, it really doesn't look a huge amount different. What is the cubic capacity of the existing buildings and this building that you've driven? Is it 1 to 2, 1 to 3?
Talking about square footage or cubic?
Cubic
footage?
cubic mass.
I would say it's probably not quite double, because the footprint of the second floor, as you can see here, the dashed lines represent a smaller square footage than the dark gray blocks.
But it's about double plus or minus.
I
bit
would
less,
say
yeah.
maybe 1.75.
Okay, so it is significantly larger building.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so if we talk
Depends
about
how you describe significant, but
yeah, in terms of mass. The thing about Pear Tree Point is it's a small place. It's 8 acres. Most of it's parking lot. The parking lot can only take 200 cars. The public access down Pear Tree Point Road is restricted, and we certainly don't want any more traffic or going down there. When the traffic gets there, where does it park? I, outside this committee, haven't heard of anybody in the town, either in the public survey or written up in the town master plan, say, gee, we need a building 1.75 or the size of the existing building. I certainly haven't heard anybody say, gee, you know, let's have an elevated ramp of 130 feet to get us there. There's a lot of community disquiet for 2 reasons. Obviously, the first reason is scenic. The second reason is, you know, this concept of flexible event space. I mean, is that just a euphemism for drinking space? And the reason why
Excuse me, look, Jim, with all due respect, so first off, you're repeating many of the comments you've shared with us in prior sessions, and you know, we're here, we're volunteering our time, we're attempting to discuss new business when we come here, so.
Okay. Well,
So
what
let
I'm
me
trying
just
to
finish, let me just finish my point, because you're venturing into territory here. I think I made it very clear through multiple sessions that we're not talking about event space, and I think it's a little disrespectful to suggest that we're talking about something that's just a space that's going to be used for drinking. So I just ask that you, and when our neighbors kind of share their thoughts, just be respectful of the fact that we're attempting to find a solution here that's.
Okay, but what I'm trying to suggest to you is that you haven't allayed that concern. Because when you say
I'm sorry, but in fact we have. Because
Okay.
we had something that was massive before. We've come back, Neil's come back with something that's a reasonable size, and it really isn't that, I mean, you say it's more cubic feet, well, of course it is, because you've got a second floor component to it. But as the overall footprint and the overall height of what you're looking at, it's really not that much bigger.
it's
No, it's not.
It's
So-
3/4 as big. It is significantly bigger than the existing building. Correct?
square footage wise.
Yes.
So Jim, could you please just move on with your point and let's kind of.
I mean, you're repeating stuff that you've told us time and again, and we've heard it, and we've come back, and, okay, so you want us to, you want less, you want
I was
even
actually
less.
trying to agree with you moving on to my next point, but continue.
Please, go ahead.
Okay. There is a lot of neighbourhood support. If you could just try and keep this existing structure, rehabilitate it, rejig it, reclad it, repurpose it. If you want to put additional decking on at the ground floor, no problem. Ramps up to the gazebo, no problem. So what I liked about this conversation and what I thought you were actually going in the right direction was that this is a very successful beach in its own right. Let's try and do minimal changes to the beach because it works.
We're in agreement, Jim.
Yeah.
Jim, we're in agreement.
So all I think I'm suggesting is please try and hold on to the existing structure. By all means, make it more accessible for people with disabilities. That's a great idea. But just keep it at ground level. Keep any additional decking, and nobody's objecting to any additional decking. Keep that at ground level, and I think you'll have fairly solid community support.
Well, it's a good point, so thank you very much for that. And I would just remind us that the community, in fact, is roughly 22,000 plus people throughout Darien, so it's, you know,
Yeah,
that's
but
also something
22
that we're mindful of here.
Okay, there's 200 parking spaces. 22,000 people will never come down here. This is a small local
But it is
community
a town
family
park.
beach.
But
It is a town park, but it is a small family beach on a sandbar to all intents and purposes. And you know, if you use statistics like 22,000 people, really is no relevant to the decision of one building size.
Well, it's relevant because it's a town park and it's accessible for the entire community. So, you know, in any case, any further?
I have something I'd like to say, Janine Hackett.
I have your contact,
Okay,
thank you, Janine.
Thank you. I'm much happier with what you came back with this week. It's much smaller. I thank you for doing that. I do still have a problem with you keep saying it's only 4 inches, only 4 inches, but you really, if I may put them, it's significant. It's significantly bigger. We're working towards hopefully the right place. Thank you, Martha, for your suggestions, because I know we went from very, very early on, maybe restaurant space, catering space, event space, program space. Now we're down to hangout space. And really the bottom line question is, do we need hangout space in a building? Can we just have decking up there? Do we have to have any kind of indoor space? I look to like who's shoveling the snow off this when we get to winter, how are we maintaining flat roofs, all that kind of stuff. The skin thing just blows my mind because I worry about having done so many renovations on my house, like the air between that mold growing in there, like that thing is just mind-blowing to me, but I won't stick to that. My big thing is the ecological maintaining the beach, and I know we didn't discuss that tonight and briefly touched on it last time, and I don't know who this firm is that you're referring to, but I see you're working with somebody, Weston Sampson or something like that. The dune heights, whatever. Last time when I saw your plan, it looked like you were having like dunes and a separation and another dune and a separation. I don't know if that's correct. I just don't know how that works, and are we really paying an expert to come in and really analyze that? Because for me, when you have a dune and a space between it so cars can pull up and see through, how is that helping? Because the water's going through, and I just don't understand. Are we doing the maximum we can do to save the beach? And to me, that's a solid dune. That's a solid dune where we have to get, maybe the ramp is up and over that. But I just want to make sure when we're working with this firm that we're really doing enough to save the beach. I mean, I feel like a lot is concentrating on this, and I understand everybody wants this done. I want the beach saved, and I want to make sure this is a high priority. And if we're doing a dune here, are we doing a dune here? Because the water comes up here, and once we put the dune in here, high tide, we lose the beach completely, which I'm not complaining about. I'm just saying, like, we need something solid going through, and I appreciate people like to park there. I do as well. I can't see the beach from my house. I like to go park there as well, but if we need the dune, it needs to be solid. And I'm just wondering, are we getting an expert to come in and present what's the optimum to save the beach?
The answer to that question is yes.
Yes.
Okay, that's a big
Yeah,
question
thank
for
you.
These
me.
guys have done a number of projects like
Okay.
this. so.
I didn't see that on the last plan, so that was one of my big questions. And I think that's all I'm gonna say tonight. I don't wanna repeat what I said in the past.
Thank you so
You're
much.
hearing me, and I'm
Thank
hoping
you.
we're still striving for this and working towards what do we really need down at that beach. And the decking, I think, is a great idea. If it could be lower, that would be great. I still really don't understand why we need an indoor space elevated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
May I have your first and last name? I'm sorry?
Little in Pear Street.
Again, please.
Scott Fine, F-I-N-E. I would say two things kind of concern me. One was the dunes, just because we are the first, we're the first dock to the left as you kind of look at the beach. So we're kind of right here.
Oh, okay.
We're the first dock that kind of goes out here. We've been there for 22 years. I would say we used to have roughly 5 feet of water at low tide. We sit on sand now and rocks. It's all because every single year they continue to put more sand here to protect the beach, which I really want to protect the beach. It all gets redistributed out this way. So now, and they won't let us dredge. That's fine. I'm really worried about if we continue to build these high dunes. I think these storms that come in, guys, I've been there for 22 years. I've never seen anything like it over the last 10 years. I really worry about the expense. I know what it is for me on my seawall. I know what it is on the dock. It is a multiple of what it was 10, 15 years ago. So I really worry, anything we build on the beach, you guys have to really understand the expense on a yearly basis of the upkeep. But the redistribution of the sand is something that really concerns me on both sides, of what that would mean. And then secondly, building out on these, considering, I think that is a really, really terrible idea on many, many levels. Our dock sits way higher than this and is underwater consistently. To the point that we have 4 kids, we don't let them go anywhere near that when that kind of water starts coming up. We have issues with teenagers, which I have too. Listen, they love to hang out down here. They love it. They love to wander out this way and go out on our dock. And we have, real risk that someone can get hurt, especially when it's really slippery. When you kind of walk out there, it's concerning. So I love what you guys are trying to do. I love trying to activate spaces. I love our town. I love the fact that Tokyo is different than Pear Tree and Pear Tree is different than Reed. I love the effort. Those are the things I'd really be sort of careful of. I do believe if you put decking out there, guys, there's kids out there all the time. They wander out on our dock drinking. It happens. So to think that if you shut the beach down, whatever space that we activate there, kids are going to congregate there. And how we sort of monitor that and the risks around that is something the town really needs to think about, because we've had to think about that for 22 years. But thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mike, I just would like to ask you a question. Let me just go back. If you're looking out at the beach, there's a house that's for sale.
That's ours.
Is that your house there? And then that's your dock? Isn't it in front of the house next door, more or less?
Oh, my parents live next to me.
Okay,
So we have the first one, the one with the stones all around it.
okay.
The really
I
big
know
one.
exactly what dock.
Fortified plant.
Okay,
And they're right next to us.
okay.
Yeah.
So now, did I understand you to say that the town puts sand on this beach and that sand washes away every year?
They try to sort of preserve the beach, right? They add more sand.
They haven't added
rarely.
sand. We
It's-
added sand a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it's something that we had an issue.
But other than that, we haven't added sand to that beach in almost 20 years.
That's great.
So I just want to make sure that that's clarified.
Great to hear.
For the record,
If you build
because that-
4-foot dunes or whatever we're sort of talking about, that's a lot of sand. And that will get redistributed like that.
I just wanted to clarify that
No,
for the
thank you.
record, because I didn't want anybody thinking that we did get sand when we haven't had it.
Right.
Yeah, fair enough.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you.
I'm Perry Boyle, P-E-R-R-Y-B-O-Y-L-E.
Sorry, please again?
Perry, P-E-R-R-Y. Last name Boyle, B-O-Y-L-E.
Thank you. You're a
I'm on
student.
150 Goodwives. So I actually don't consider myself a neighbor, so please don't label me a neighbor. I live a mile away. And my axe on this is the environment. Through Friends of Gorham's Pond, I donated a lot of money to put the fish ladder in for Gorham's Pond. And this entire estuary has been grossly mismanaged by the town for forever. That picture is very telling. That's not a beach, that's a sandbar. And this model is a little misleading. It shows mean high water. It doesn't show the high water. Like, this is regularly underwater. And Mr. Fine just noted that it's washing away over time. This beach will go away. It should. The natural course of environmental events, this beach will erode. I think the words being used to describe some of the structures are a little misleading. Those are not jetties. A jetty is legally defined as a landing place for a boat. As Mr. Hawk noted, they're underwater. They're breakwaters designed to preserve the sand on the beach. Okay, they're not jetties. So more development of this sandbar is just so contravening of what its very nature is. The fact that it's paved, six of the 8 acres, is that correct? Is paved with an impermeable surface is kind of an affront to nature. As you go through the rebuilding, I think you should really think hard about making that parking lot more porous. This is really an environmental nightmare. And to put a bigger structure on it, I'm very glad to hear the direction that this committee is going. I think the things you're talking about make perfect sense. So less is more at this place. And I was very worried when I heard about the last committee that it seemed like the whole purpose was development to create rental income. I get that it's not. I appreciate that, and I really do appreciate all your service. You guys are doing a public service here. But please look at it as what it is. It's a sandbar. That's all it is. And it's going to go away probably within our lifetime. I've lived here 20 years myself, and it's smaller today than it was when I moved here. And it should go away. That's what sandbars do. So trying to force it to stay there just so somebody can get a view of the sunset just seems odd to me. But thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Thank you very much, appreciate it. Okay, any other new business from the, moving on? Any other new business for the committee here? No? Great, so with that, I just ask for a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Tom, second?
Second.
Cheryl, all those in favor? Thank you very much.